The footman had been trained never to let a stranger pass the screen of the great hall, and yet the woman in the grey travelling cloak was already 3 paces into the long gallery before anyone thought to stop her, because she walked as though the floor of Caradoc Hall had been laid for her feet. Julian Vane, Duke of Ashcombe, turned from the window with a laugh still half on his mouth, a laugh meant for Miss Pike, who stood at his elbow in primrose silk, and the laugh died. He knew her at once. He had spent a year teaching himself not to. Marianne, her name came out of him before rank or sense could stop it. And in a house where servants were never addressed without their title, and ladies never addressed at all without an introduction, the bare first name fell into the gallery like a dropped glass. Your Grace. She did not curtsy. She crossed the last of the distance between them and laid a single folded paper on the long table, and on the fold sat a disc of black wax, pressed with a device no one in that room had seen in 50 years, a tower, and beneath it a broken chain. I have come to put something right that your family has carried wrongly for 3 generations. You may read it now, or you may read it before witnesses. I would advise the witnesses. It was the steadiness of her hands he noticed, against his own will. Not a tremor. Her father 12 years dead, her name struck from his house a year, and her hands did not shake at all. Behind him, Mr. Harlan Crewe, the man of business who had served the dukedom 30 years, whose ink-stained fingers held the household's every figure, went the colour of tallow and set down his glass. Madam, Crewe said, too quickly, this is a private house. Whatever Charity brought you to the door, Charity, Marianne did not look at him. She kept her eyes on Julian, and there was nothing soft in them, and nothing pleading. And the strangeness of that she had come not to ask, but to inform, held the whole gallery still. No, I think you will find I have brought you the opposite of charity, Mr. Crewe. I have brought you an account. What is this? Said Mr. Pike, the Bristol banker, his daughter's hand tightening on the Duke's sleeve. Ashcombe, who is this woman? Julian could not answer, because the answer was, she is the woman I threw away to marry your daughter. Marianne answered for him, lightly, and the lightness was the cruelest thing in it. I was, until last spring, betrothed to his Grace. He found a better arrangement. She inclined her head towards Cecilia Pike, without malice, which was worse than malice. I do not begrudge it, Miss Pike. By the time we are finished here, you will be very glad you were spared. She turned and walked back down the gallery, unhurried, and at the door she paused. Read the paper, Your Grace, and send to Wells for a man who knows the law of baronies. You are going to need one. Then she was gone, and the seal lay on the table with its tower and its broken chain, and no one in the room could have said why the air felt as though it had been let out of it. He did not open the paper for an hour. He carried it to the muniment room, the cold, vaulted chamber off the library, where the deeds and registers of the Vane family slept under 3 centuries of dust, and read it alone. And then he sent for her, because what was written on it could be answered by no other living soul. She came. That surprised him. You walked into my house, he said. The paper was in his hand. After everything. You walked in. It is not your house. She said it the way one corrects a child's sum, not unkindly, only completely. That is the difficulty, Julian. It never was. Do not call me that. You called me Marianne in front of your banker and your bride. A flicker, there and gone, at the corner of her mouth. I think we may dispense with your Grace between the 2 of us. We have so little time left in which it will mean anything. He should have rung for a servant. A duke did not stand alone in a locked room with an unmarried woman. The awareness was bred into him so deep he felt the breach like cold on a tooth. But the thing she had written had taken the floor out from under 30 years of certainty, and a man falling does not think about chaperones. Explain it to me, he said, plainly, as you would to a fool. I find this morning I am one. So she told him. She did not sit. She stood with her hand resting on the lid of the oldest chest as if she already knew what it held, and she told him about Edmund Vane. Your great-grandfather had an elder brother, Edmund, the fourth Duke's first son. She watched his face. You were taught he died at sea in 1766, unmarried and without issue, and the title passed sideways to his younger brother, to your line. You were taught the senior branch simply ended. It did end. It married first. She said it quietly. In 1763, at a small church in this county, Edmund Vane married a woman his father would never have allowed, and 3 years before the sea took him, she bore him a son. The marriage was hushed. The boy was raised under his mother's name, a clergyman in a Somerset living so poor it would have shamed this family to hear of it, and he never used the name that was his by right. Because by the time he was old enough to claim it, the men who could have proved it were dead, and the men who profited from doubting it were not. The cold of the room had got into Julian's hands, and this clergyman was my father. Thomas, you knew him. Julian, your own father knew him better. Why do you imagine the old Duke arranged for you to marry a country parson's penniless daughter? He was no man of affection, by every account. He owed my father a debt he could not name, and tried to pay it the only way a Vane knows how, by folding us back through the front door, by marriage, before anyone thought to ask why he cared. Julian set the paper on the chest very carefully, as though it might go off. You are telling me you are a Vane. I am telling you I am the senior Vane. And there is a thing that goes with that which you have never had to think about, because it has sat under your dukedom your whole life like the stone under a house. That was the first crack in him, not the claim, but the last sentence. The way she had seen in a single morning the exact shape of the certainty he had been raised inside. He had stood in this room 100 times and never wondered what held it up. What goes with it? He said. It was not quite a question. She only looked at him and let him want the answer, and did not give it. The door opened then on the tap of an ebony cane, and Lady Augusta Vane, his great-aunt, 80 if she was a day, who had buried 3 dukes and feared none of them, came in without being asked. Edmund's girl, the old woman said, looking at Marianne with eyes gone bright and terrible. Good God, you have his hands. She lowered herself into the one chair without leave. Julian, ring for wine and stop gaping. There are things in this room older than your right to stand in it, and I am the only one left alive who was told them. Sit down, both of you. I have waited 50 years to say this out loud. He did not believe her. He told himself he did not believe her for 3 days, which was as long as it took for the dinner. It was Crewe who pressed for the dinner, who arranged that the Pikes should stay, the neighbourhood be invited, the betrothal to Miss Cecilia Pike celebrated loudly and at once before, as he put it, this unfortunate person and her fantasy can do the family's credit further harm. Julian let him, because part of him still wanted badly for it to be a fantasy. Marianne came. Of course she came. Lady Augusta had her brought in the family carriage and seated at the table's foot as though daring the county to object, and the county did not dare, because the dowager's stare could strip paint. It was over the second course that Crewe made his move. He rose, glass in hand, the picture of a faithful old servant grieved past silence. Your Grace, honoured guests, I had hoped to spare this table an unpleasantness, but I find I cannot eat beside a slander and hold my tongue. He turned to Marianne, and his voice was gentle, which was how Julian first understood that the man was dangerous. Miss Hartley has produced a paper claiming descent from a son of this house, a son who died, every record agrees, unmarried and childless, 51 years ago. I have served this estate 30 years. I have read every register, every settlement, every page. There was no marriage. There was no child. There is a poor woman, lately jilted. Forgive me, the table knows it. I will not pretend. Who has reached for a story to mend her pride. I pity her, but I will not see this family bled by a forgery. It was beautifully done. Half the table looked at Marianne the way people look at a beggar who has overreached. Cecilia Pike's eyes had filled. She was 19, and kind, and out of her depth, and Julian felt a stab of shame for dragging the girl into it. Pike wore the frown of a man recalculating a sum. Marianne set down her fork. "You have read every register, Mr. Crewe?" she said pleasantly. "Every page? How fortunate! Then you will be able to tell the table the date on which the marriage register of St. Breock's parish, the small church above the combe, you know the one, it is on your own estate, loses 3 of its pages, the years 1762 to 1764. Cut out, Misty, Crewe, not lost. Cut, with a knife, and recently, by the look of the binding." She let that sit. I wonder who would have the keys to a parish chest on Ashcombe land. I wonder who would know precisely which 3 years to remove. The silence had teeth now. "You will have to do better than missing pages," Crewe said, but the gentleness had gone thin. "I intend to. But not tonight, and not for your benefit." She rose, and the whole table rose with her by instinct before they remembered they need not, and that small involuntary courtesy was its own verdict. "Your Grace, I thank you for the dinner. Miss Pike." She looked at the girl with something almost tender. "You have done nothing wrong, and I am sorry you are in a house where so many others have. Good night." Julian followed her out, telling himself it was to see her to the carriage. On the dark steps, under a sky scraped clear of cloud, he caught her wrist and let it go at once, as though it had burned, because the rule against touching her was the only rule he had left. "If this is true," he said, "lo, say what you have not said, what goes with the senior line. You have let me lie awake on it 3 nights. She was very close. The cold had put colour in her face and her breath came short. And so, he realized, did his, and the rule that they could not touch made the bare foot of air between them feel like a held note that had to break. "Not yet," she whispered. And then, almost gently, almost as the old kindness between them had been before he killed it, "When I tell you, Julian, you will not sleep at all." She got into the carriage. He stood on the steps a long time after the wheels had gone. He found out 2 days later, and she was right. He did not sleep. It was Lady Augusta who detonated it, in the muniment room, with a deed 80 years old spread under her spotted hands, and Marianne standing by, and Crewe, summoned and unwilling, pinned in the doorway. "You have been a fool, Julian, but I will not have you a comfortable one," the old woman said. "So attend." The Dukedom of Ashcombe was made in 1703. A young title, as titles go. It descends, as all such honours do, to heirs male, which is why it came to your line when Edmund's branch was thought to fail, and why it stays with you now, whatever this girl proves, because she is a woman and cannot hold it. You may keep your strawberry leaves. Be glad of them. They are about to be all you have. Aunt. Under the dukedom, Lady Augusta went on, relentless, tapping the deed, and a great deal older than it sits the barony of Caradoc, created by the king's writ in 1322. And a barony by writ, nephew, does not care whether its heir wears breeches or skirts. It descends to the heir general, the eldest blood, man or woman, in unbroken line. For 500 years this family held the barony and the dukedom in one hand, and never asked which hand was older. This hall is not the duke's seat, it is the baron's. The 18,000 a year is entailed to follow the barony, and always has been. She lifted her terrible bright eyes to Julian's white face. Edmund was the elder son. His blood is the senior blood, and his blood is standing in this room, and it is not yours. The room tilted. Julian put his hand flat on the cold stone of the chest to keep the floor where it was. Then everything, he began, and could not finish. Everything you sold her for, Marianne said quietly, and there it was, the thing she had carried 3 nights like a coal in her bare hand. The estate. The income. This house, the name your banker is so eager to marry his daughter into. None of it was ever yours to trade. You kept your dukedom and lost the ground it stands on the day my grandfather was born. And the man who made very sure you would not know it, she turned, full-on Crewe, is the man who has had the run of those accounts for 30 years and cannot afford to have them opened by a court. Crewe's face had stopped pretending anything at all. You can prove none of it, he said. I can prove the marriage, and the marriage proves the rest. Everything turns on 3 cut pages. Missed, Crewe. The only question left is which of us reaches them first. She walked past him to the door, and Julian moved without deciding to, and for one moment they stood near enough in the dim that he could see she was not as composed as she made the world believe, that under the steadiness her pulse beat hard at her throat, that this had always cost her. And the wanting to close the distance and the prohibition against it filled the doorway until neither could move through it. Her eyes went to his mouth. His to hers. Lady Augusta's cane rapped the floor like a pistol shot. The 2 of you, the old woman said dryly, are going to have to learn to do that somewhere other than the deeds chest. Out, both of you. The dead can keep their secrets one more night. He came to her the next morning at the inn, properly, this time, with his aunt's companion for a chaperone left pointedly in the parlour, and his hat in his hands like a boy. I have dismissed Crewe, he said. Not that it mends anything. He had 30 years' start on me. He turned the hat. Marianne, I have to ask you a thing, and I have no right to ask it. So I will ask it badly. Why did you not simply ruin me? You had only to take the paper to a court and let the law strip me bare. Instead, you walked into my gallery and warned me to send for a lawyer. You gave me the means to defend myself. Why? She was a long time answering. The morning light was on her, and she looked tired in it, human in it, the armor off. Because I did not come here to ruin you. I came to be paid what I am owed. They are not the same thing, though I grant they have lately got tangled. She looked down at her hands. And because once, before you decided I was worth precisely £40,000 less than Miss Pike, you were the only person who ever spoke to a poor parson's daughter as though her opinion were worth the having. I have not forgiven you, but I find I cannot want you destroyed, and I have been very angry at myself about it. It undid something in him. He had been raised by a father who filed every softness out of him like a burr off a casting, who taught him that a duke's heart was an expense the estate could not afford, and he had believed it, had let it make his choice last spring, had let Crewe's columns of red ink stand in for his conscience. I told myself I had no choice. Crewe swore we should lose everything by Michaelmas without the Pike money. I told myself a duke marries where the estate is saved, not where he wishes, and that you of all people would understand a hard necessity. He made himself meet her eyes. It was a coward's arithmetic, and I knew it while I did it. I chose the title over the one thing in my life that was real, dressed it up as duty, and let you think you were too small to keep. There is no apology that is not an insult next to that. I will only say, I knew. For a moment something crossed her face he could not name. Then she stood, and her voice changed, went level and clear, the voice of the woman who had walked the length of his gallery as though she owned the boards. Your Grace, stop apologizing. I am not the one you wronged, your name was, and your name is about to answer for it whatever either of us wishes. So put the regret away. It is no use to me. Tell me instead what you intend to do, because Crewe has had a knife in a parish chest once already, and the original register that proves my grandfather legitimate is sitting in an unguarded box on land that, until a court says otherwise, is still under your authority and not mine. He will go for it tonight or tomorrow. The only thing standing between 5 centuries of truth and a fire is which of us moves first. So, Duke, are you going to stand in my road, or are you going to ride? He looked at her, and for the first time in a year he felt the whole crushing weight of the dukedom lift off him. Because she was not asking him to be a duke, she was asking him to be a man who did the right thing, knowing it would cost him everything. I am going to ride, he said. He chose the worst hour to do it publicly, and he chose it on purpose. The Pikes were still in the house, the neighborhood still buzzing, and Julian, instead of slipping quietly to the church above the combe, called the household and the guests into the great hall first. Banker, bride, dowager, servants, the lot, and burned his bridge before every witness he could gather. Because a thing done in a corner can be undone in a corner, and he meant this never to be undone. Mr. Pike, he stood under the dead arms of his own family and made himself say it plainly. I cannot marry your daughter. Not because she is not everything a man could wish. She is, and she deserves a husband who chose her for herself and not for £40,000, which God forgive me is what I did. But I cannot bring her a single acre that is honestly mine. The estate you were buying into belongs in law and in justice to another, and I mean to help her prove it. You came to make your daughter a duchess of the richest house in the county. I am about to make her the cast off of the poorest duke in England. Take her home, sir, with my apology, and tell the world I am a fool. It will be the truest thing said of me this year. Pike went red, then white, then, being a banker before a father, went very still and began, visibly, to subtract. Cecilia Pike, to the astonishment of the room, laughed once, a young, startled, relieved laugh behind her glove, and Julian understood he had freed 2 people in that sentence, not 1. You are throwing away the saving of your house, Crewe said from the edge of the hall, soft and furious. For a story. For a woman who has nothing. She has the older blood, Crewe, and after tonight she will have witnesses that the Duke of Ashcombe knelt to it. I have made my choice in front of 40 people, and I find I am not sorry, which is the strangest sensation I have had in years. He took up his gloves. Now I am going to the church to guard a parish chest. I would advise you not to be on the road to it. He did not know, riding into the dusk, with 3 of his men behind him, whether she would have him at the end of it, or only take her birthright and leave him in the wreck. He had chosen her before he could know. That, he thought, was the only part he had got right in his whole wasted life. He was too late by an hour. Crewe had not gone for the chest that night. He had gone the night before, had ridden out the moment the word baronies left Lady Augusta's mouth, and when Julian and Marianne reached St. Breock's in the grey morning, the little church stood open, and the iron parish chest stood open, and on the flags before the cold altar lay a drift of black ash that the drought lifted and turned. And the marriage register of 1763, the original, the one unrepeatable proof that Edmund Vane had taken a wife and made a lawful son, was a handful of charred curl among the rushes. Marianne went down on her knees in it. She put her bare fingers into the cold ash, as though she could read it, as though 5 centuries could be lifted whole from the cinders if she only touched them gently enough, and her shoulders went down. And Julian, who had seen her steady through her own jilting, through a dinner of insults, through the unmaking of his entire world, saw her at last not steady, and it was the worst thing he had ever watched. He has won. Her voice was a stranger's. Without the marriage line, my father is a bastard in law and I am no one. Baptisms, graves, none of it matters without the marriage. I knew he might. I knew, and I let one more day pass arguing with you in a deeds room. She closed her ashy hand. 500 years, Julian, and I knelt in a doorway wanting to kiss the man who took it from me, while the man who meant to burn it rode past in the dark. He had nothing. He had burned his fortune, his bride, his servant, every defense, on a proof that was now smoke, and he knelt in the rushes beside her with empty hands and no power left in the world. A duke of nothing, and that, kneeling beside her with nothing at all to offer, was the truest he had ever been. "Then we find another way," he said. "There is no other way. Do you not understand? This was the way. This was the only way." He had no answer. For the first time he let himself simply be at a loss beside her, and not pretend, and they knelt together in the ash a long while, and the cold came up through the stone. The hearing was set for a fortnight later, at the county town, before a commissioner sent down from the Committee for Privileges of the House of Lords, for Marianne's petition to be recognised, as Baroness Caradoc had already gone up to London before the fire, and the law, once started, does not stop for a man's arson. Crewe came to it. He had to. He was witness and accuser both, and he came in his good black coat, with the confidence of a man who has watched his single danger burn to ash on a church floor. He testified, smoothly, at length, that he had served the estate 30 years and knew of no marriage, that the Hartley claim rested on a register no living person had ever seen, that the petitioner could produce baptisms and graves and family talk, but not the one document the law required, the proof of the marriage itself, and that without it the chain broke and the claim was nothing. He was sorry for the woman. He was sorrier for the family's good name. He sat down certain. The commissioner turned to Marianne. "Madam, the estate's man of business is correct on the law. Baptism does not prove legitimacy. Marriage does. Can you produce evidence of the marriage of Edmund Vane?" Julian could not breathe. He had spent a fortnight and the last of his credit hunting another path and found none. He had nothing left to give her. He could only watch. Marianne stood. She had her composure back. Had it back, he would realize later, since the second morning after the fire, and had let no one see why. "I cannot produce the parish register, sir," she said. "It was cut, and then it was burned, on Ashcombe land, by a man with the keys. His Grace and I found the ashes." She paused. "But Mr. Crewe has made one error in 30 careful years, and it is the error of a man who knows parish chests and does not trouble himself with cathedrals." She drew a paper from her glove. Not the folded memorial of that first morning, a fresh sheet, heavy, and on it a great pendant seal in red, and the device beside the seal was a mitre. "By the law of this realm," Marianne said, and her clear voice carried to the back of the cold-panelled room, "every parish in the kingdom must each year copy its registers and send the copy to its bishop. The bishop's transcript, a second record, kept 50 miles from any parish chest. In the diocesan registry at Wells, behind a door Mr. Crewe has never held a key to in his life." She laid the paper before the commissioner. "This is the certified transcript of the Register of St. Breox for the year 1763, sent to the Bishop of Bath and Wells in the spring of 1764, and never since disturbed. It records the marriage of Edmund Vane, gentleman of this county. I obtained it 11 days ago, the morning after I found my grandfather's marriage burning on the altar where it was made. Mr. Crewe burned the copy he could reach. He did not know there has been a second safe and waiting for 53 years. She turned and looked at Crewe, and her voice did not rise. It did not need to. "You should have read every register, Mr. Crewe. You only read the ones on your own land." The room came apart. Crewe was on his feet, then the commissioner's clerk was on his feet, and the words forgery and embezzlement and the King's Bench were in the air. Because once a court has a man who has confessed to keeping the accounts of an estate he was secretly draining, and to whom the destruction of the original now plainly pointed, the rest unspools fast. Crewe was taken from the room. Marianne did not watch him go. She had not orchestrated it. She had only laid one true paper on a table and let the truth do to him what he had spent 30 years doing to the truth. And Julian, standing among the witnesses with no power, no estate, no part in the mechanism that had saved her, Julian, who had been able to do nothing but ride too late to a burned church, watched the woman he had thrown away win back 500 years of her blood with her own hand, and found that the loudest feeling in him was not grief for everything he had lost. It was pride in her, so fierce it stopped his breath. The commissioner adjudged the barony of Caradoc, and the entailed estate that followed it, to Marianne, Baroness Caradoc, in her own right. She found him afterward in the empty stone passage outside the hall, where he had gone because he did not think he had any right to be in the room while she received what he had spent his life standing on top of without knowing. "It is done," she said. "I have everything. You have a title and a heap of debts, and not 1 acre to your name." She studied him. "Crew thought that would break you. The whole county thinks it ought to. You look, Julian, like a man who has just set something heavy down." "I have," he said. He could not stop looking at her. "Marianne, I have nothing to offer you. That is not modesty. It is an inventory. The estate is yours. The income is yours. I came here a duke, and I am leaving the poorest man in the shire, and I find I am only afraid of one thing in the whole of it, and it is not the poverty." "What are you afraid of?" "That now you have collected everything I owed you," he said, "you will be right to walk away from the man who made you come and collect it. And that you would be right is the part I cannot bear." She was quiet. Then she took one step, and another, and closed the foot of air that had stood between them in every doorway for a fortnight. Closed it herself, deliberately, the way she did everything, and put her remembering hand flat against his chest. "You broke a betrothal for £40,000, she said, "and then you broke your fortune in half, in front of 40 people, for a woman who had no proof and 1 chance. Before you knew she had a second copy hidden at Wells. Before you knew she would win. Before you knew she would have you. You rode to guard a chest you had every reason to let burn." Her voice was not quite steady now either, and she let him see it. "A man who chooses you when you are worth nothing is the only kind of choosing I will ever trust again. You did it backwards, Julian. You did it a year too late, and at the price of breaking my heart first. But you did it when it could only cost you and never pay you. So no, I am not going to walk away." He kissed her then, or she kissed him. Afterward, neither could honestly say, and they argued about it pleasantly for the rest of their lives, and it was nothing like the careful, rule-bound foot of distance they had been drowning in for a fortnight. It was the breaking of a held note. The letting out of a breath held a year, and the cold stone passage of the county courthouse was, of all the unlikely places in England, where the Duke of Ashcombe finally came home. They were married in the spring, at St. Breock's above the Combe, in the same small church where Edmund Vane had married in secret 54 years before. Openly this time, the doors flung wide, the parish chest mended, and a new register begun in it in a fresh clerk's hand. Caradoc Hall belonged to her now, every stone and acre of it, and she ruled it as her grandmother's grandmother might have, with a steadiness the household came to lean on, and the strawberry leaf coronet was his and worth, in pounds, almost nothing, and they found between them that this suited them exactly, for she had spent her life owning nothing, and he had spent his owning everything, and somewhere in the middle they met as equals at last. Harlan Crewe was tried at the next assizes for the embezzlement his 30 careful columns had finally betrayed, and transported for it, and died. The report came back 2 years on, somewhere very hot and very far from any parish chest, and Marianne, hearing it, only nodded once, and went on with the morning's letters, for she had stopped giving him room in her thoughts the day she laid the bishop's transcript on the table. On a bright morning a year into the marriage, Julian found her at the long table in the gallery where she had first walked in as a stranger. and she was sealing a letter to Cecilia Pike, now happily and lovingly wed to a Bristol shipowner of her own choosing, who wrote to the Baroness Caradoc faithfully, and signed herself your most grateful friend. Marianne pressed the wax with the old signet, the tower and the broken chain, the ring her father had carried in poverty all his life and never once dared to use, and Julian watched the device come up clean and dark in the wax, and thought of the morning a year before, when that same seal had landed on his table like a sentence. "The chain is broken on the seal," he said. "I never asked you. Why a broken chain?" She smiled without looking up. Edmund had it cut into the ring the year he was disinherited. A broken chain, a line cut off. She lifted the letter and blew gently on the wax. "I have always meant to have it recut whole, but I think I shall leave it." She looked at him then, and the morning light was on her, and her hands, he noticed, as he would notice every day for the rest of his life, did not shake at all. It is mended where it matters. Let the ring remember how near it came to staying broken. We of all people ought not to forget. She sealed the letter, and the broken chain pressed whole into the wax, and the gallery floor, laid, after all, for her feet, held them both up easily, as it had been waiting 500 years to do.